Everyday Business Solutions, the podcast that offers you the right perspective on achieving success. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Everyday Business Solutions. My name is Haley Morris. I'm your podcast coordinator and host. Today, I have with me Michelle. Michelle is from Ronald McDonald House, and I'm going to let her introduce herself. Michelle?
Hi, thank you for having me. I'm the development director at Ronald McDonald House, which means it's my job to make sure that we have the money that we need to keep the doors open. In a Ronald McDonald House setting, there are about 368 of us worldwide, the house itself. Every house operates on its own, so there is a Ronald McDonald House global organization, but it is our job to make the money that we need to keep our doors open. And if something were to happen, say the economy collapses in Toledo and we don't have the support that we need, we literally close the doors after you run out of, say, endowment money or whatever. Mm-hmm. So there isn't an organization above us. Like McDonald's Corporation does not come in and say, oh, that house isn't doing so well, we'll give them, $2 million or something like that. Every house needs to have the staff to keep it open and running and support all the programs that we decide to have.
Okay. Out of curiosity then, how does a house form?
So that's our house. I can tell you the story of ours. Some of them form from a hospital saying we need a Ronald McDonald House. Some of them form from the community. Ours was actually formed by three founders. One, Gary and Tricia Junker. They had two daughters who grew up with CF and passed away in their, I want to say 12, 14 years old. And Gary and Tricia had lived in many different areas, but when they were in Columbus, they used the house in Columbus. So then Gary relocated to Toledo, and he decided we need one here. Mm-hmm. Dr. Voti, Pierre Voti, he also was a doctor for children with CF. And Gary and Tricia knew him from their experiences elsewhere. Well, Pierre also came to Toledo. And then one of our regional Ronald McDonald's owners, Don and Venice Michael, they also wanted to be involved. So Gary pulled the three groups together, and they started the fundraising and kind of the process of getting a house. And it all goes through our global organization. Mm-hmm. But the three of them were responsible for building. Well, they didn't build the initial house. The initial house was actually, people who've lived in Toledo a long time know this, but it started out as a farmhouse way back in the early 1900s. And then it was a decent piece of property. You would need to imagine where the roundabout is right now for Toledo Hospital. That's where the house used to sit. But that was all farmland in the early 1900s, and probably where the hospital is as well. A funeral home took it over. As once the farmer sold, the funeral home was there. And then the three founders, that's the building that they bought to start Ronald McDonald House. Many people kind of hesitate with that, but there are several houses. That house was a 14-bedroom home. Several houses of the 300 and say roughly 70 worldwide begin in something such as a funeral home because it already has the rooms that you need. So it sounds kind of, I would never want to live in one, you would think, but it's the perfect building to begin with for a house of that size.
Wow, you're right. Like, you need the rooms and the space and everything, but it is kind of weird to think, oh, this is a funeral home.
Exactly.
But it's kind of cool because you do get to repurpose something that had a sadder connotation and rebrand it as something that's a little more helpful to the people currently living.
Right.
So
And the proximity to the hospital is always key. And it just so happens with Toledo Children's Hospital, that's why they chose that location. I mean, we could have located further downtown, but the Children's Hospital is what drove that. And Dr. Voti was actually working there. So.
Yeah, and that is the point of it. Speaking of talking about the point of the Ronald McDonald House, I grew up hearing about it, and I'm sure many other people did. But tell us more about what the Ronald McDonald House does, because we know it's associated with the Children's Hospital. Mm-hmm. But what does it do? What is the functionality of the Ronald McDonald House?
So again, worldwide, depending on where you go, we're all different. Our particular house we'll start with Toledo. In Toledo, our mission is to bring access to health care closer for families. So that doesn't mean we're the doctor. It just means we give you proximity, okay? So any program that we decide to institute or begin or try, it's all about access to health care. So a Ronald McDonald House exists for the family. Now, many times a family may include an adult child. So at our house, a child is considered anyone from in vitro to the age 21. So if you had an adult child, unfortunately, there are accidents. Accidents happen. Maybe it's a sporting accident and you end up at Toledo Children's, the family could stay with us. We also consider anyone with a lifelong disability, a developmental disability, a child for life. So we have families who come back, have specialized doctors in town, and they come back and they'll stay with us. And then also anyone with a lifelong children's illness. So as you're growing up, CF is one of them. Unfortunately, the life expectancy for CF is much shorter, but we do have adults who come in. Also, if one of our doctors in Toledo Hospital has a specialization, many people from around the country will come in. And if they're going to see that doctor, they can stay with us. So we are there to provide everything that is needed. And we like for people to think of the Ronald McDonald House as a family arrived there, let's just say, went into premature labor. The last thing that you have time to do is pack a bag at that point, right? Most likely you were at your doctor's office. They said, we have an issue here. You're going to Toledo Children's. So the house is ready for you with everything that you need. So you obviously have the overnight room. It's a private room. Fully stocked with every toiletry that you would need, from shampoo, toothbrush, toothpaste, everything that you need. The room itself will have a queen-size bed. It'll have a pull-out sofa, so if your parents needed to come and stay with you for a while, we certainly encourage that because family is needed in time of crisis. And we also have a lazy boy there for moms who are very pregnant. Sleeping in the lazy boy sometimes is much easier than just crashing on that bed. We also have brand new clothing. For instance, we had a family a couple of years ago that when they arrived at the house, it was in the summer. So unfortunately, the baby was very, very early, and they had been in the house all through the summer. And we get into the winter, and we notice that mom is wearing flip-flops. And we're like, what's going on? And she's like, I haven't left the baby, so I haven't gone home to get any. Well, we have clothes and shoes as well. So we accept only new. We don't accept any used clothing. And we were able to help her with that. The other thing is the house is fully stocked for food. Every night there's a hot meal prepared for the family, not by the family, but for the family. Typically that's a group from around town. Could be the company that you work for, or could be a family that used to use the house or still uses the house and comes back. And the hot meal is ready. It's always ready at 5 o'clock, and it's out until 7. We keep it warm and hot. Of course, during COVID, that was all different, but we're going to pretend that we're just back in normal times, which we are now. And the family can come down anytime they want. And then all the leftovers are packaged into containers so that if they come back later at night and want to eat dinner, warm something up, or the next day they're going to head back to the hospital, the containers are ready. They take them with them to the hospital, so they're not eating out of vending machines and spending unnecessary money. So we have all of that. Fully stocked pantry. Again, those are all donations from around Toledo and our regions, companies, families, just keeping the pantry stocked. Breakfast and lunch are typically on their own. They make their own breakfast and their own lunch. Sometimes a group will come in for that as well, but it's not something that we necessarily solicit for. We really want dinner to be the meal that they're ready for. So they have all that, and then we also have laundry facilities. And that we have one on each floor, so we're a 3-floor facility. One is off the playroom. When we moved into the new house, couldn't figure out why families didn't use the playroom a lot. And they were like, well, it's in the basement. In the original house it's in the basement, and I really need to get laundry done, and you can't leave the kids there alone. So when we moved into the house, we added that. The other thing that we do at our house is we have a day guest program. So a day guest is someone who really doesn't want to stay at the house for whatever reason. Number one, it could be that they have a Toledo mailing address. We actually don't offer overnight stays to people who live in Toledo proper. The house is for people who live outside of Toledo. Or maybe your child is receiving some sort of treatment that you need to be there for. But come on over, have breakfast, come have lunch, do your laundry, do your child's laundry, whatever needs to be done. So our house basically services any hospital in Toledo. There are hospitals that deal with eating disorders in Toledo. Families don't stay at those hospitals, but they can stay with us. We are closest to Toledo Hospital, obviously, because we're there, right there on the property, but we certainly invite families from all around. Other homes, or houses, if you will, are specific to an illness. So if there's a children's hospital that specializes in cancer, sometimes that house is only there to serve the families of cancer patients. Just depends on where you are. Toledo, we have one house. Ann Arbor has 2. New York has 4. Chicago has, I think, 2 or 3. So, just depends on what the service and the regional area that's needed. We cover one of the largest geographic areas of any house. We actually cover 21 counties, which when you think of Toledo, when you think of Northwest Ohio, that's pretty much what you think of, right? All the service areas.
The surrounding.
Right. And basically when a house comes into existence, you are there until you bump into the next house. So if you think about, okay, you're going to travel from Toledo to Ann Arbor, Michigan. So we would have the counties right up until it seemed better that someone come from Ann Arbor, to go to the Ann Arbor house and the Toledo house. And that's kind of how we do it. We go as far east as kind of Erie County, and then you hit Cleveland, and they have a house, so we don't need to worry about that. And then we go down toward Columbus, and we go all the way to the Indiana line, because then there's another in Indiana. So, and that's pretty much how every house exists. Now imagine, though, if you were in Montana or, Minnesota, obviously, their region is bigger, but they tend to be closer into the cities. So, people come.
Well, and most people are probably going to come into the cities for the care anyways.
Exactly. Exactly.
So it seems like a lot, but when you think they're coming to the hospitals for care, and that's what you're focusing on.
Exactly.
So, it's very eye-opening, because we always hear about it, and it has to do a lot with, like, children and the hospitals and things like that. But to put an actual perspective on, you're providing care and like almost living assistance for the time that they're there and they need it, is incredible, because I know I've seen people with kids going through things and how much of a difficulty it can be to get the everyday tasks done when you're just trying to take care of all of the medical side, which is a crazy thing that doesn't seem surmountable at times. So
right. And at the end of the day, there's no cost to a family. We pay for everything. It right now in 2021, the actual cost of a family staying with us per day approximates about $157 a night. We never ask a family for any money. If someone were to say, no, I really want to do something, we just say, consider $10 donation. A family coming out of a hospital, no matter what the reason, has insurmountable hospital debt.
Yep.
ICU, we have a family who just left us maybe within the past month or so, had been with us for 80 days. So you consider 80 days, NICU baby, all the costs that went into that could be insurmountable. So we really don't look for any money from a family. We give them ideas. You do a Facebook fundraiser. You could do, you could ask for your family to collect pop tabs. Believe it or not. Okay, so that's usually what we all remember, right? Even me growing up. The little pop tab houses, which we still have.
We have one in the
You
office.
do have one here. And those are the kind of things that people can do. It's just the little things, and you think, that really isn't doing much. Well, right now, aluminum is at an all-time high, and our pop tab recycling alone offsets part of our food budget, more than half of our food budget. So when you think of something like that, and a family could just, next time they have their soda, they pop the tab and save it for us. So, and it's amazing when I go places and get the pop tabs, the containers that I'm given. I've come back with pop tabs in every possible, from pails to coffee containers, which is good because it always has a lid, right?
Yeah.
The big Cheetos containers, the big, oh yeah. It's fun, and we kind of have like little jokes around the, like, okay, what did your pop tabs come in today? So the houses don't last long, which is good, and then they start dumping them into something else, but.
That's funny. Yeah, no, I've been schools and other things when you get to collect pop tabs. There we go.
Mm-hmm.
And so now we do it with the office. And it's a really cool thing from a business perspective because it's so easy. We have pop in our break room and sometimes some sparkling water and things like that employees can go get. And so we have a recycling bin for the pop cans, and then we have the little house for the pop tabs.
Yes.
And so everybody kind of knows to separate them.
Separate them, yeah.
Yeah, it's such an easy way. And then that small step can go so far. And then if you think like every area of business were doing that, how far that would go.
We have some Whirlpool Corporation, as a matter of fact, they have set up recycling stations for us all through their plant, which I got to tour, by the way. It was pretty amazing, I must say. But those are the kind of things, and people, usually it's kids, if I go to a school and they talk about it, they always want to know why I don't want the can. And the reason being that the most pure part of a can is the pop tab. Now, this was true up until things like Jolt and all these energy drinks, and they started painting those tabs.
Yeah.
That does require a process, obviously, to remove that, but it is the most pure part of a can, and it requires the least amount of processing. We are fortunate in Toledo that OmniSource, number one, provides the dumpster for us outside. They come and pick it up, dump, recycle, and give us all the money for it. They don't, and I know that they have to then go through a process, so they do have to sort that out, but they just give us the all the money back, and they don't charge us for the dumpster or anything. So that's not kind of nice. That's very nice to have that relationship, and we're fortunate to have OmniSource in town. So
it's really cool because that's them saying, okay, our part is doing this for you. This is how we can contribute to the house, which
exactly.
And employees too, from like the business perspective, love to know that they're doing something to help. And so even if it's like, we love like Project Playhouse and some of the other things that we can get involved in, but it's a cool little way to like know that even when you're drinking pop, you're doing a little something. So getting involved as a business, even if it's just in a small way, and then you can say, hey, look how much we're donating this month, or these however often people bring them in, depending, I'm assuming, on the size. Ours is a smaller office, but Whirlpool's got to have a lot.
Yeah, I'm excited because the first time that they're ready, we're still talking about, do I get to come back there and they're going to do the presentation, or are they going to bring people up here? We always like those photo ops, obviously.
Yeah, because you have where you dump it and everything, and you can do photos.
Yes, yes. And we have children who have been at the house, maybe from, for instance, Whitley. Sweet little Whitley, 3 months old, was diagnosed with neuroblastoma, and I believe she had like 13 tumors when they found it. Whitley is now 4, and she is a beautiful, bubbly, spicy little girl. And every year, as a matter of fact, she was just at the house last week, she comes and she brings all the tabs at her family and such. And of course we make a big deal because Whitley was with us for the better part of her first 2 years of life. She actually celebrated her first birthday at the house. We had a cake and everything for her. But those are the families. We have all kinds of families. One young man showed up a couple years ago, and he's already in high school. And we're just like, wait, what happened? Like, I haven't been there that long, but it's the stories of the families, and there's pictures, and you're like, but I know who you are. You are just this little guy. So I think that's what makes Ronald McDonald House special, is that from childhood, because like you said, we learn about it in our schools, all the way through. And I'll go into an organization now, they'll reach out to me and say, we're kind of interested in finding out a little bit more. And then when they introduce it to the company and find out, oh, well, actually, one of their employees, well, yeah, when our son was born, we were there. It's not something that people talk about. It's you don't go into a situation and meet someone who will say, oh, by the way, did I ever tell you I had a child who was in the NICU for how you don't. That's not how you start out. So it's really interesting to then reconnect with those families. Like, okay, where sometimes they'll say, well, I was in Columbus. Well, okay, great, but how was it? What did you like? And very, very reassuring that the work that we're doing is making a difference when people they just start their stories and tell you all about.
Yeah. Well, and people not talking about it later, I kind of think of that as a good thing, because that means throughout that whole ordeal, that was the one thing they didn't have to think about. That was the one thing they didn't have to worry, and it was like a stress off, so they could focus on what matters, because that, especially when you're talking about the babies and when the babies are struggling, it's hard for people.
That's a really good point. I never really thought of it that way, but you're right. That's exactly right. That's the part of their life at that time that they didn't have to worry about. The food will be there, the laundry will be there. It was, and as I said earlier, we certainly encourage families to have their extended family come and stay with them, because that's so, so important. That was so hard during COVID because the house was closed to any outside guest. We just couldn't encourage that.
Yeah.
But I think, when we look at that awful pandemic, everything had to be that way. But it was so hard on us not seeing and getting to meet the extended family. It's all
it's a family affair. Like what you're focused on is the family unit and those connections within the family unit. So when you don't get to stress and rely and build on that, it's a little disheartening. And I think that's why, people have struggled in the last, it's just about 2 years, Jesus, is because things like family and things that we just assumed would at least be our steadfast, were kind of off the table all of a sudden.
Right. Exactly.
So, and my grandma lives 3 hours south, and I saw her for a period when numbers got fine, and then it was like, okay, well, I can't visit again, because it's a little, it's just too risky to go down, and things like that. So it is crazy to think about, like, everybody was distressed when you're down to, like, the either no visitors,
right?
Which for a while that was crazy, or the one visitor, which is still very common, is if you're there, usually it's still down to only one for some of the facilities. What I know somebody who's I think doing cancer treatment or something, and everybody came up to visit, and they're like, you can't even stay by the hospital, like, you have to be off the property. They got there one visitor. So that's hard for people. And of course my grandmother picked that time to get bit by a rattlesnake.
Oh no.
So we literally just sat out on some benches by the hospital and kept, we were there, but we couldn't go up and see her. Right. She's fine.
That's good.
But
oh, goodness.
She's a fiery woman, but walking in the park up in Ann Arbor, so watch yourself up there, I guess.
No kidding. Okay.
Yeah.
Good to know.
Unfortunately, they were right by the hospital, and that hospital happened to be one of the few that have, in the tri-state area, that have the anti-venom. So. Oh. Yeah.
Well, if you're going to get bit by a rattlesnake, that's the place to do it, I guess.
She just wanted to scare us.
Mission accomplished, Grandma.
Yeah,
Thank
you. Right. So I'm glad that you guys are kind of back on a normal pace now, that you can open things back up and bring back in the family side and that support system. Because it seems like that's what you are. You're part of that support system. So, all right. Now, shifting a little bit, let's talk about what you do specifically at Toledo's Ronald McDonald House.
Okay. So, as I said earlier, I prepped my job description a little bit by saying every house has to raise the money to stay open. So, in Toledo House, for instance, in 2021, in order to meet our operating budget, we need $1.3 million. And it's my job to secure that money. And it comes from a variety of avenues. We do some grant writing. We have some grants that come to us without even being asked. So there are people who probably set up a foundation, and when they passed away, Ronald McDonald House was there and always will receive money. But it's a matter of writing a grant request, making sure that we can kind of hit the soft spot of the board that's going to decide on how they're going to distribute that money. So we do that, and keeping in mind that with the service area we have of 21 regions, we do look to fundraise out in the regions. Because when you think about it, asking Toledo to give, Toledo families aren't really the ones receiving our services. Mm-hmm. Toledo does tend to be our biggest supporter because of so many companies and people locally who know of us, obviously.
Yeah.
So fundraising does incorporate grant writing. It's also about relationships. So I've lived in Toledo all of my married life, which recently was 30 years. I just passed that 30-year mark.
Wow, congratulations.
Thank you. My husband is a very wonderful man and is a very patient man, as everyone will tell you, to have put up with me for that long. So relationship building, really, it's funny because I started out in market research, of all things, automotive market research, right out of college, went to UT, fell into an internship, started working locally. And as life, takes you along a path, you are forming relationships with people. And then I eventually went into fundraising. And then you start to reconnect with people. And not intentionally so much as you are now in a different area and you're in a different focus. And the people that are also have what's the word I want? Passions, that's where you cross paths again. So all of your life, you have all these people, and sometimes when you find them again, you're like, where do I know you from?
Yeah.
But it's all about those relationships. So I think it's about 20% of our donations come from individuals. So you have the grants, and then you have individuals. And obviously, it isn't strictly me who solicits every dime. We do mailings, we do newsletters, we reach out to anyone who has come in contact with the house, maybe through email or things like that. We also work closely with a lot of businesses, and most nonprofits do. You want to have their involvement from the top down. So you do want, obviously, them to think about you in their corporate giving. But what's important at a Ronald McDonald House is the staff, that they'll come and volunteer. We need about 250 volunteers a year just to keep the house running. So we want, help with the dinners being made at night. We like to have someone at the reception desk. It's easier to have a volunteer there than it is a paid staff, because a paid staff, you're like, wow, you could be helping elsewhere as well.
Yeah.
So we like volunteers there. We have people who come in and stack the pantry for us. So things like that, you don't know. It's back to that time, talent, treasure. And when you're a fundraiser, you do still look at all three of those. Of course, the treasure is what makes the 1.3 million, right? But the time and the talent are just irreplaceable for us. Someone willing to come in and help us. For instance, we had a company. They were kind of a startup, but they're a building. They were a group of builders. Mm-hmm. And in the spring, they had a slowdown and like, okay, every spring we will come and we'll walk through the building with your maintenance person and we'll do all the maintenance that needs to be done. Well, can you imagine, we only have a part-time maintenance person, to know that, hey, we don't need to necessarily worry about every light bulb fixture to be changed right now, or the fact that that particular light switch isn't working, because they're coming in to help us with that.
Take care of it.
Yeah, so those are the great relationships, right? So obviously the corporate giving. And I think when you look at it all and you bring it all together, you're really focusing on the mission and getting that out to people. And that's what I do, whether I'm talking at a civic organization or a school. I haven't been invited into a school in over a year, but
a little while.
Exactly. I love being invited into schools because that's where it all starts. Philanthropy starts at a very young age, and it's lead by example. Mm-hmm. So it's great to start talking to the kids about what the house does and show them pictures. But then it's also, my job is also to keep them engaged, not only the children, but the families. So here's an interesting fact for you. In fundraising, I've been doing it for many, many years. Many strong donors are older donors, typically a female, particularly. A widowed female is much more inclined to give than a widowed male. These are just facts. I don't make things up. A female will stay with you longer. A male is more of a, okay, here you go. I'm busy, kind of, and
Yeah.
typically they are, right? But interestingly enough, at the Ronald McDonald House, where the average wealthy or maybe repeat donor in the worlds I worked in prior was usually you're 55 and older, okay? And you think about it, you're raising your kids, you don't really have that money, but then your kids get off your payroll, and then you can start really looking at where your philanthropy interests are. At the Ronald McDonald House, the average age of our donors is between 18 and 35.
Wow.
Very interesting, right?
That's
But
a really young age group for donors.
It is. We have more donors at that age than we have the older. They don't give as much because of their age. Obviously, the older donors are the ones that would give more. But the reason being, that is when they are still remembering the house.
Yep.
So let's just say you were young. I had my first child at, say, 24. And you're still remembering, your child is still growing up. At 34, they're only 10. I still remember being at the Ronald McDonald House and in the ICU and everything they did to me, or did for me, I should say. And then they've graduated. Oh my gosh, what a relief. Look at this child. We didn't even know if they'd make it. Now they've graduated. Okay. The Ronald McDonald House is kind of forgotten at that point because now they're an adult. And so my job is to not only keep that age engaged all the way through, but then to, if you think about it, you're not actually talking to the grandparents, but then you want to talk to those that are grandparents and tell the story of this is what has happened or could have happened in your life. So
a lot of times I think of grandparents too, and I think of my grandparents. My grandma's so connected to her grandkids, and that's also the age group that you're probably helping. Like her youngest right now is 7, but and then there's me, the oldest. So she's got quite the age range.
She does, yeah.
They're that also you can make it relevant to them.
Exactly.
Exactly.
And so obviously you want to talk to all of them, but it was just so interesting to me to take our database and analyze it and say, wait a minute, my average donor is how old? And the funny thing was I didn't know at the time our global office was doing the same thing. They were analyzing, and our results matched. I mean, that is the primary age of the donors. I should say the bulk of the donors, okay? But again, I need to emphasize those are
that's where your highest percentage of
percentage,
donors
not your highest money. Obviously, so that's, pretty much what a philanthropy officer, or in my position of development director, that's what we do.
Wow.
We want, and events, the most time-consuming way to raise money, but also good to get your mission out. It's so funny because obviously everything went virtual in 2020, and our biggest fundraiser is our heartwarming party. It's always in November, and we obviously switched to virtual last year. It was so interesting to go from months and months of planning, and the week before an event, you're 50 hours, 60 hours just trying to get everything ready. To, this is going to be virtual. It's 1 hour. You turn it on, you turn it off. It was just so different. So right away I said 2021 needs to be virtual as well. It was before the Delta variant came out, but because it's in November, I figured flu season. Right? Now, I rolled the dice. It could have, maybe COVID could have gone away completely, and I would have been like, I should have had a live event. So as it turns out, I took some flack. people, what do you mean you're going to do it virtual? We need a live. People were tired of virtual. And I said, let me remind you that in 2019, you had to beg, borrow, and steal to get people to come to events. They were so tired of events.
Yep.
It's, oh, great, another silent auction, and I'm going to bid on things that I really didn't want or really didn't need. So we did stay virtual. It will be virtual again this year, and thank goodness we did, because obviously indoor events aren't a good idea, and our global organization is not allowing any houses to do indoor sponsored events. But anyway, events are a big part as well, and that gets your mission out.
Yeah.
Another huge way that a Ronald McDonald House is supported is through McDonald's owners and operators, okay? So, for instance, Shamrock Shakes. You and I go out and buy a Shamrock Shake. The owners take part of the profit that they make on that and they donate it back to the house. Every time a Happy Meal is sold, they give the house. Right now, actually, during 2020, they increased it to 2 cents. It doesn't sound like a lot, but trust me.
When you think about all the Happy Meals that are sold.
Exactly. That's a lot of money. What else? Oh, koozies in this area were sold. The sleeves that went on the cups,
Yeah.
they're very hard to come by because they only order a limited amount and they're only sold during a certain time. It's in the spring. But those, every house gets, well, not every house. Our house, for instance, our owners did it. And for everyone sold, we got $2 of the profits. So they are just huge. And they account for about 25% of our revenue every year. Very supportive of the house. They also do a golf outing for us. Most times when I had done golf outings in the past, you're making $6,000 to $10,000 and you're thinking it's great. Our owners bring in about $75,000 for us in a golf outing. They're out there, they're getting the companies, their suppliers involved, and we do a very nice golf outing, but thank you to the owners and operators, because the house itself doesn't do a whole lot toward that. We don't need to. They just take care of everything. Wow. So events are important. Again, it's a mission moment. Now the golf outing isn't a good example of something that takes a lot of our time, because it doesn't. It takes a lot of the owner's time, and they give it freely.
Not gonna lie, our businesses love golf outings.
Exactly. As a matter of fact, it's one of the bigger companies. I was talking to them recently, and they're like, we've never been in your golf outing, and we're actually looking at expanding it because we are able to fill the teams just with McDonald's suppliers, and now word's kind of getting out that it's a pretty good one. Obviously when you have McDonald's operators kicking in a lot of the little prizes you get and things, and your cart is full of goodies, word gets out. So some houses do even bigger. Again, depends on where you're at, right? That they can raise money, but pretty much all the owners come together and do golf outings for the houses. So I really can't stress enough that obviously we're called Ronald McDonald House for a reason, but McDonald's Corporation is why we exist. It's why we're here. Anybody can read the story of Ray Kroc and how he swooped in on the Philadelphia Eagles and took over their Eagles nest, and that became the first Ronald McDonald House. So, wow, yeah, it's an interesting history. For another time, you can read it online, or apparently he has I want to say it was on Netflix or something. Somebody did a little story on him. So.
I have to keep an eye out. All right, I think we're getting to a good point to start to wrap up. So my question for you would just have to be, oh my gosh, I'm trying to think of it. Of course I'm going to blank. What are you hopefully next year we're in this period of more of a full-on normal. We get past cold and flu season, and hopefully we don't have any crazy variants that crop up. We've got a lot of vaccinations going, and we've got a lot of research and handle on this whole thing, right? Hopefully your event in November is in person then. What are some other things that you're looking forward to from the house's perspective, which is kind of being fully back in the pace of things?
So it's funny because it's kind of started now.
Yeah.
Right now we have a couple families at the house that there are siblings with us. And the other day I was walking down the hall, and they got off the elevator. It was a sister and her two brothers. And I'd say they're probably all from, the sister was at the house, so she has to be younger than kindergarten, and then down to maybe the little guy was maybe 2. That is what has been hardest for all of us who work at the Ronald McDonald House, is the fact that during COVID, they were really in their rooms all the time. The general areas of the house, which is a 35,000 square foot home right now, were closed. They ate dinner in their rooms. We had refrigerators put in every room, which we've never had before. We didn't see them. For the longest time, the house was closed. We didn't even take new guests. We were actually putting them up at hotels and then taking their food to them at the hospital. We had arranged for a courier kind of to meet us at a door, and we would leave the food for the families. So I think the biggest thing is just seeing those families again and getting their pictures and talking to them. I mean, I love to talk to families. And it's not that I want to know their story so much as I just want to know them. I mean, that's what my job is all about, just, relationships. And I think we're starting to see it right now. Goodness sakes, this Delta variant needs to just stay away from all of us. But we still require masks in the house, so we still have that. Especially in the front of the house. Anytime I go out there, I'm in a mask. Obviously, families come down in masks. But I think the biggest thing is just, we all say it, but back to the normal. And our normal is families in and out of that house all the time, eating at all different times of the day and night. And that's what I miss. That's what we all miss. It's just, what your mission is, and you're there to provide access to health care. But when you go a year and a half and you see, maybe, honestly, because we've been working from home a lot, when I actually physically saw maybe 5 families, it's so discouraging. Like, are we doing... Now, we had more families there, don't get me wrong, but you're not seeing them because they weren't hanging out. So just back to talking to them and the little kid... Our administrative offices are adjacent to the playroom. The number one rule in the playroom is we never want to hear shush. You never shush a child, not in our house. And so that's the first thing. My office is closest to the door that separates between a hallway. And honestly, I will come out of my office if I hear a parent telling a child, no, don't yell. No. This is a very trying time for this child, whether it's the child receiving services or healthcare issues, or I'm here because my little sister is in the hospital and this isn't my house. And, it's not a time, it's very, very hard for the kids, right? Yeah. So to be back in the office now and hear kids having fun, the drums being played, the piano, the loud voices, it's just, we literally sit there and just be like, yes, this is why we're here. We had a dad in 2019, was a incredible pianist, and we have a grand piano in our family room. We used to prop the door open when he would come back, and it was his way of kind of resetting after being with his son was in the hospital for a very long time, premature, and he would just do it to relax, and those are the things that we most look forward to. Our occupancy is up again. When you think about it, we're basically the occupancy of a hospital kind of dictates what ours looks like, right? And so the NICU has been down. Typically, that's probably about 90% of our families are NICU babies. So that has been down. During the summer, we were usually full with waiting list because of elective surgeries for children. A lot of orthopedic, they haven't been doing those. So this summer we weren't as full. We're averaging like 18 families. We have 28 rooms, so we like to see 28 families. Yeah. And that's kind of our other thing is we just want to see the house full, because for us, we feel like there's something missing in our mission if we can't have 28 rooms full. Like, there's got to be someone else who needs us. That's who and we have a hospitality suite in the hospital just for that reason, because we want to make sure somebody walking by, hey, do you know about Ronald McDonald House? Do you want to? So I think that's where we all are, is just wanting, but again, I think that's the world, right?
Yeah.
But for the Ronald McDonald House, we will return to a normal, because our normal is a full house. For most of us outside, I know my life will never
Be the same.
Right, it'll never be the same.
Yep.
But what we do, it will always, we didn't change a mission for COVID. So
Yeah, it just had to change for a second.
Yep.
While everybody got their stuff together.
Exactly.
The world got its stuff together. So yeah, no, and it sounds like being in that kind of environment, the general sound is life and vitality and screaming children, I'm sure. So I can't imagine, like, I have 2 dogs and 1 kid that's in my house, and that's how I wake up, is all of that. And then usually neighbor girls are coming over, like in the summer, we have the cool pool, so all the kids end up in our pool. And so, like, you come home and you're not greeted by a dog, something's wrong.
Exactly. It's the same thing.
Yep.
As a matter of fact, I actually contemplated asking our executive director, could we have a comfort dog? Because I was at the point where we need something in this house.
I need somebody to run and greet me.
Because the Columbus house, I think it is, has a dog. And I'm like, we need a dog. But I don't want to take the dog home and take care of the dog. I just want
See, I'd be the one that'd be like, the dog's coming with me tonight and tomorrow night.
somebody else would have to. Now, ours is a 24/7 wake facility, so we don't have staff that sleep. So technically the dog could,
Stay there.
But again, now that and then there's risk with that too. Not risk, but you have allergies and there's all kinds of things you have to consider.
Have recommendations for the allergy concern.
Yeah, exactly.
But they're also very hyper dogs. No, I had a 120-pound boxer. He's a very well taken care of boxer, and he was climbing on my lap this weekend.
Sometimes they forget they don't know how big they are.
And he was so pleased because I just let him do it. So I'm a dog person, so I'm like, yes, get the dogs, all the dogs.
Yeah. I have a grand puppy. That's all I have right now, and we've been taking care of him a little bit here when my son and his wife were on vacation. But I've learned that it's probably not something that I've never had an indoor animal, and I love him dearly. He's just a sweetest dog, but. Gosh, that's a lot. That's a 24/7. That's like having a kid again.
It is a kid. Yeah, no, my friend she doesn't want kids, and she's a cat person, and they just recently got a Newfoundland puppy. I'm like, are you crazy?
Yeah, cats are easier.
I was like, I'm like, I don't want a cat because I like plants. But I love cats. I just don't want it in my house because I have plants, and I already have the plants. But I was like, I'll take 6 dogs and I'll take 6 kids and I'll be fine. But that's my thing. I was like, I know what I'm getting into. I was like, you got a puppy, and a big puppy.
Mm-hmm. That's what this guy is. He's a Great Dane Lab mix. So he's
I love Great Danes. Great Dane Lab mix.
Oh, he is the gentlest soul, honestly. It never barks. He's such a sweet boy.
I dog sit on the side, by the way.
I'll let them know. But Grandma and Grandpa dog sit all the time. We don't let anybody horn in on that. I told him the other day I was vacuuming their house, and he wouldn't move from where he was. I don't know what he was doing. And I said to him, I plan to be much stricter with grandchildren than I am with you, just so we're clear.
Whoa. He knows you're not telling the truth there.
Exactly. My daughter was there with me. She's like, right.
She just laughs hysterically. All right. I think this is where we're going to wrap up. Is there anything that you would like to leave our listeners with?
I just think if you, no matter where you're listening from, if you feel that anything I've said has interested you, just reach out to your local chapter, your local Ronald McDonald House, see if you can get involved, what you can do. There's so many ways to get involved. Everybody's looking for volunteers. So, yeah. And it is if ever there's an opening and you think you want to work there, trust me, it's a wonderful place to work.
All right. Well, thank you, Michelle. I appreciate this so much. I appreciate learning. I've learned a lot today. We've already talked. So thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. And then thank you, everyone, for tuning in to this month's episode. I'm excited to see you next month. But in the meantime, head over, check out the blog post. We'll provide all of the information you need to get in contact with either Michelle or another Ronald McDonald House and everything we just went over. So thank you and have a good rest of your month. Until next time.